My hat! Now I have to get the chassis ready. So this is the LCG, low center gravity chassis for Traxxas. Now I've already put that in and installed this, but we're going to go ahead and do the Nerf bars. Now you're going to need some hardware from your other chassis, and it's just these 4 screws that hold the Nerf bar on. So you're going to need your 2mm driver for this. And regardless of your setup, you want this chassis. This is the chassis that you want for your slash. The high center of gravity chassis, the only thing that's good for is for your car flipping over. Just flipping this way on high acceleration or flipping over sideways on turns. I mean, it makes your vehicle look cool on 2S when driving on dirt. Go on pavement, take a turn, you're going to just tumble. You're going to be tumbling all over the place. And it really doesn't make a difference. You can hop curbs with this chassis, even though it's LCG. So there's really I can't think of any reason why you want the high center of gravity unless you like wheeling and tumbling. It's the only thing I can think of. For example, VXL on 3S, you're just going to flip it. I mean, 2S, it'll do wheelies. If you have the correct gearing on a brush system, you'll do wheelies as well. Usually you just need to tighten your slipper clutch, to be honest. But this will get rid of the wheelies, and the car will just take off. It'll be faster. Alright, so that's there. Now, bottom plate, this is where the servo goes, so you have to install the servo. Now, I'm not going to install a stock servo. I'm actually going to install this Savox Servo. This is a 1268 SG, so SC. There we go, kind of. SC 1268 SG. This is a metal gear servo, and the reason why I'm installing this one is because I'm going to use the Traxxas aluminum bell crank. That's the reason. And if I use the other servo, I need to run a servo saver, which I'm not going to be running a servo saver. And if I don't run a servo saver, I'm just going to destroy the plastic gears inside. So get a servo that has metal gears in it, or else you're just going to destroy it. And if you're used to running a servo saver, this is 2.5. If you are used to running a servo saver, you need to drive a vehicle without a servo saver. It's a big difference when it comes to response and predictability. Servo saver makes your steering somewhat unresponsive. So you're just using, I am using the stock screws, and this here is going to mount second to the top. Those are the top holes that you're going to be using. And then the very bottom for this portion here. There we go. One of the things that you want to do with the servo when you're installing it on the slash, you want the horn to be 90 degrees, so perpendicular to this surface. So run some power through it with the transmitter that you're going to be using, and, well, I mean, run some power through it with the receiver battery. But use the transmitter that you're going to be using, make sure it's neutral, and then once it's in neutral, you can install the horn, because you will know it's going to be 90 degrees. So here I am going to use the stock horn for now. I do have an aluminum one, which I will install at a later time, but right now the idea is to reuse as many of the parts as possible. And to be honest, I am going to be running this one. I'm going to run it just to see if it breaks. It will probably break. Plastic horns usually break when you don't have a servo saver. Alright. That is that. There's already some thread lock on there if you were wondering. Just go snug. Do not over tighten. And perfect. Once you have that, there's this little gap in here. That's where the wire goes through. So send the servo wire in through there. And then just place it here. You can install the steering bell crank before running the wire. It doesn't matter as long as you have enough space. The bell crank, I will not be using the stock bell crank. I don't think they're that great. I prefer the Traxxas aluminum bell crank. This is the one I would recommend. They only had blue, so I picked up blue. Color doesn't matter. They perform the same. Does come with extra hardware. Very well packed, and Traxxas has very high quality aluminum parts. Alright, so this is the front, that's the rear. This already has ball bearings in there, so you have the bearings. This is just going to slide on. You are going to need some of this hardware, so just open the bag, take the screws out. You shan't be needing them all, but some of them. What I like about these Traxxas ones is the ones that need thread lock already have some form of thread lock on there. And this just drops in. Actually, I should use the shim from the old one. Just grab the box with the old parts. So these shims just go in there. There's 1 and 2. Alright. So I'm going to be reusing that. Now this is just going to fall into place. It is going to be snug. It'll be fine. And then you can actually reuse the old screws. It's the same thing. And these already have the washers, so instead of taking the washers out, I'm just going to reuse these. There we go. Alright, so I decided to go actually with shorter screws because the other ones were too long. They will fit your high CG well because that's what comes stock, but for these, just use some shorter screws. Right now, the ones I'm going with are 15 millimeter screws, and they will be long enough. And do not over tighten this. The other thing too is you want to make sure it holds everything, but it doesn't bind. There we go. So that moves freely. Now we'll do the other one. Alright, perfect. So your steering should move freely. I'm just going to pull on this wire, and this plate is ready to be attached. So these two marks, that's where the heads of these screws are going to go in underneath. So if you look at that part of the chassis, that's where everything is sitting. That is it. So now we just need the following. We need 1, 2, 3 screws, and that's going to hold the lower chassis plate to the top chassis plate. And you're going to need your 2.5 millimeter driver for those. Let's see. Goes there. Oops. Better to hold it. Alright, that's close. Let's do this one. So this one I can go ahead and tighten. I'll just tighten this along. And again, just snug, do not over tighten. You can damage that lower chassis plate. I mean, it's not that expensive. It's probably about $6, $7, but why spend extra money? It's one thing to upgrade, it's another thing to replace parts that you messed up through negligence. Alright, good. And that is it. So the chassis is now ready to go, so we can start mounting some of the other items, such as the receiver box. Now your ESC is going to go on the right side, your receiver box is going to go on the other. So we're going to go ahead and flip this, and we're going to go ahead and mount the receiver box. Now for the receiver, we are going to be using the factory Traxxas, so we're going to be using a TQI system. Now one thing that I recommend before you actually put the box, run the ESC wire through. Now for the ESC, let's see, what should I go with? Should I go with the VXL or should I go with the brushed? And the answer is I am going with the brushed ESC. So let me actually mount the ESC first. And you're probably going to have questions as to why I chose the brushed. And the reason why is, I have some other systems. I have some other motors that I could run. But I decided to keep a Traxxas motor just for fun. Because I told my friends, having a big mouth, told my friends that I would take on their short courses with this Proline build and keep up. I didn't say I'd beat them, I just said I would keep up. So as long as I can keep up with this brush system, mainly because everybody gives this stock Traxxas system a hard time, decided to prove them wrong. And the reason behind it is this. Yes, VXL system, brushless, is more powerful if you run 3S. Out of the box, I made a video. VXL is faster out of the box, but if you put the right gearing on the brush one will actually keep up using 2S with a 2S VXL. One huge advantage of the brush system over the VXL is actually how smooth it is. Sure, it has bushings instead of bearings, but a race is generally 4 minutes. In that time, that's plenty of time for it to cool down. Yes, it gets hotter, but it cools down that period of time. And I am using the Proline transmission, which has that giant aluminum motor mount, which will work as a heatsink. But keep in mind that the VXL system, yes, it has more power, it's a little more efficient, but when you're racing, if your system gets 10 minutes versus 12 minutes, who cares about those 2 minutes? You're only racing for 4 minutes, and you should have more than one battery anyway. And I know I told you to run the wire, and I did not run the wire. But it's going to make your life easier if you listen to what I say instead of doing what I do. And if you run the wires first through here, it just makes it easier. My ESC is already mounted. This is already mounted. just makes it easier to run the wires here through the chassis. Now I have to grab this and kind of push it over to the side. But if you do make this mistake, I mean, I got caught up talking about the motors, you can just use your drivers and push this through. And that'll be that. It'll be set. There we go. Slipped. Perfect. But the VXL system is a sensorless system, so it kind of it cogs a lot. So when you're racing, you're braking, you're accelerating, and you're taking those turns. That cogging makes it not a very smooth system to drive, and that's the reason why I chose to go with the brushed system, mainly because I'm going to keep up with a Traxxas system. So out of the two, for my purposes, I think the brushed will be a better choice. Now I'm going to have to turn this receiver around just so my servo wire fits. And I'm going to have to run this one through this inner part. Take this and place it there. There we go. And remember, your servo wire goes in channel 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in channel 1. Let's see, there's 2 channel 1s. We'll go for the second channel 1. There we go. Perfect. And your ESC goes into channel 2. Do not flip them around. Do not mix them up. If you mix them up, you're not going to damage the receiver or anything. The only thing that's going to happen is when you turn the wheel, your car is going to, let's see, if you accelerate, it kind of dies. It doesn't really do anything because throttle is actually your steering. And then when you turn the wheel, it'll try to go forward, but it'll kind of stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. There we go. Perfect. Now the receiver's on. I'm using the same double stick tape that was on there. I have to line this up, and I have to get this servo wire out of the way so that I don't destroy it once I put the lid on, the old cap on. All right, perfect. So it's going to go there, and that's going to go in there. Great. And I actually like putting the small cover on first. Keeps the wires in the correct spot. Now this is a 2mm. And the reason why I'm using the stock radio is, I mean, I have a different radio I can use, but I'm trying to keep the stock one just to show that stock one works. And a lot of people are probably going to already have a slash with a stock transmitter. Just use the stock one. Once you're ready to upgrade, go ahead and upgrade. Now because I flipped this, I'm going to flip this cover as well because I want this to kind of match the light and this to give me access to that button for programming. Although this is already programmed, still want to have that access. And I'm going to go ahead and cover this up. Now I get to do this one as well. Alright, good. And just to check over here. That's why I'm using the XL5. One thing about brush motors is they are very, very smooth compared to brushless, uncensored motors. That's why crawlers, you still see that a lot of people run brush motors on crawlers. The other thing too about brush motors is because those brushes are always creating friction. It almost works as a small little brake when you release the throttle before you go into a turn. That's the reason why. Alright, so now we have this, and I'm going to have to turn this around. Now I'm going to be adjusting that arm later, so I'm not going to worry about it, so I'll just put the hardware off to the side somewhere. And that is it for the chassis. So the chassis is ready to go. Alright, so we're going to continue with the build. So previously, front end was built. Now the chassis is ready. We have the aluminum bell crank here by Traxxas. I'm not going to attach it yet, and there's a reason why. But here, you can actually attach these links to the bell crank if you want first, and then you can attach everything, but I'm not going to. Use the 3 screws that were provided with the thread compound. These are the ones that came in the bell crank case, Traxxas, so there's 3 of them to use on the bell crank. I think the compound that Traxxas provides on here is a very, very good compound. But that being said, so to attach the front end, if you go up high, you don't run into problems. This just slides in. So this kind of bells out. If you're using the stock one, you're going to have to start up high here and then kind of bring it down, or go in at an angle and then twist. But with this Proline, there's plenty of space, you don't have to. And first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to start off with that center screw right here. So these are the countersunk screws, so you're going to need 3 of them, and they're all 2.5 millimeter screws. And I like starting with the center, because that's the one that's going to help me align everything. So let me go ahead and do that. And because they are countersunk, it helps align even more. So this one I'm going to get close. I'm not going to fully tighten it. I'm just going to bring it kind of close. So you see it still can move just a little for when I put the other 2 screws in. Here we go. So here's this one. This one I'm going to drive close, just like I did the center one. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this other one. And I'm going to go back to the center, tighten that one fully, and then I'll tighten the outer 2. Alright, that one's close. Let's go back to the center. Good. And again, snug, do not over tighten. Now, at this point, this is set, so now I can flip it back around, and I need to install these 2 screws first before the front bumper can go on. And for these, you're using your regular screws, so these are the large ones with the rounded heads. Then I'll do the other one. This one I will actually tighten all the way down. Just so the camera doesn't shake. Now the first one, I'm going to tighten all the way down. There we go. All right. So now that I have the 3 on the bottom and the 2 on the top, I can go ahead and install the bumper. Bumper's going to have one of the large diameter ones here, regular head, and then 2 of the thinner ones, and then 4 of the countersunk large diameter screws. And for this, I mean, you can either start at the top or at the bottom. It's your choice. I'm going to start with the center one up here. I find that it's always easier to start with a screw that will center everything. So if you have an odd number, the center one's generally the one to go with. Now I'm not going to tighten this one all the way, and the reason why is I'm going to put the 2 side screws up top to line everything up. So I'm just getting this one close. See, so this can still move. Now I need the 2 screws that went there, and for these I'm going to need a 2mm driver. And for those of you that are younger or just getting into this, maybe you don't tool very much, if you hold the screw like this with your finger, it makes it easier so you don't drop, especially if your tools are not magnetized. You don't really want all your tools to be magnetized, especially if you use them for electronics. So if you just hold your screw this way, line it up, and then turn, makes your life a lot easier. Alright, so now I can do the outer 2 first, and then I'll go back to the center one. So the bumper's now centered. So that one's finished. Now this one will be finished. There we go. And on the center. And again, make sure it's snug. Do not over tighten. Perfect. And that is that for those. Now we can flip it over once more. And these, I like going with the outer ones first. So it's the ones further to the rear. And you're going to be using 4 of these larger diameter countersunk screws, and you will be using your 2.5mm driver. So again, right, you can hold it this way, place it there. Now the bulkhead that I'm using does not have thread, so you do have to apply a little more pressure just to get it started. Now, some of you probably prefer a built vehicle, but I prefer to build my own vehicles, and the reason why is you can make sure that everything is done your way. The screws are there, tight but not overly tight. Sometimes what happens when you get pre-built vehicles, something may have been tightened accidentally too much. For whatever reason, maybe the tools were out of spec, weren't calibrated just right, they were off calibration, and next thing you know, you get something that was over tightened or under tightened, then you have screws that back out, or screws that break, or broken plastic, or threads that aren't properly made. This one is closer. I'm going to get this one closer. Oops. But do consider buying the Traxxas kit. I mean, it's pretty fun. You get to build your own truck, and then you can say, hey, I built it. All right, there we go. So now, the only thing I have to do is I have to put the steering links on. So these, I can go ahead and flip this over. Now, it's very easy. These here go on top. And the way you can tell they go on top is if you put them on the bottom, it's going to hit the plate. So they have to go over here. This is why I flipped it to show you. Right here. And the screws you're going to be using are the ones provided with the bell crank. If you did not get the Traxxas aluminum bell crank, that is alright. Don't worry about it. You can always just get some thread lock, put it on the screws, but whatever thread lock they use is great. I mean, you can put this, you can disassemble it, and then use the screws again, and it will still hold as if that thread lock compound was new. And right now I'm just starting them by hand. It's easier. Now this shock tower is much bigger, so my recommendation is go through here. If you go through there, it'll be easier for you to get to the screw and to tighten these. Right here, let me show you a different angle if the driver doesn't fall. See, so I'm just going through there, and I'm just tightening. And again, do not over tighten. There we go. And there's the screw, so you can see. And you do want to use the correct size here, because if you use something that's far too long, it's going to hit the lower chassis plate, and then your steering isn't going to work properly. I've actually seen that in other people's builds. Alright, so let's see. Alright, good. And now our steering is on. Now I am going to have to extend these because right now there's too much toe out. But I can do that later. For now, my worry is actually this arm right here for the steering. So the first thing I want to do for the steering is I want to make sure this is 90 degrees. So the horn has to be 90 degrees from here. So it's going to be perpendicular. And you need to make sure these are as even as possible. So as of now, like I said, there's a lot of toe out, and that's fine for now. I find it easier to do it this way, facing away from me. All right. And the reason why you want this is it might be easier for you to just have no toe. That works too. But these links are at the same length. So what you want to do with this link is you actually want to shorten this to the proper size to fit right in here. So right now it's too long. So I'm just going to twist, and I'm just going to go right. And this is just one right hand screw. So you don't have to worry about whether you have to twist right or left to make it shorter. Just tighten, go right. To make it longer, just loosen, go left. And you can do it by hand, but if you're having difficulty doing it by hand, just stick a driver in here or an Allen wrench, and then you can just turn. All right, and you may have to remove this one again to adjust it later on. Let's see, is that perpendicular? That is perpendicular, and that looks about straight to me. That's about right. And then again, once I have a battery in there, I can adjust either the toe or I can adjust the arm. I'm actually only using 3 fingers, so don't think I'm using my entire hand. That'd be too much torque, and I could break something. Alright, and that's it. Now the screw does come out just a tad bit, and that's fine. It's not going to affect it at all. If anything, you could even put a longer screw there and then add a nut if you want. To be honest, I've never had one of these back out. That is it. So our front end is now complete. So we can, well, except for the shocks, we're going to do that toward the end. But now we can move on to the rear part of the vehicle.